Hi everyone, Nick here from Conservation Careers and welcome to the podcast. Now if you spent time in the UK and visited a local nature reserve, then chances are you've been to a site managed by one of the 46 individual wildlife trusts that collectively represent 2,000 staff, 35,000 volunteers and nearly 1 million members. Helping to coordinate this huge force for nature is the Royal Society of Wildlife Trusts, of which today's guest is their Deputy Chief Executive. Now, Patience Thody left the commercial banking sector and switched her career towards wildlife conservation and the charity sector. She's using her 20 years of HR and operations management experience to build, lead and motivate multidisciplinary teams to deliver nature conservation activities across the UK. Now, in this episode, we explore the Wildlife Trust network, its conservation activities and also the workforce and volunteers and staff behind it. We also uncover what it means to be a Deputy Chief Executive, the skills Patience uses and values in her role, and also what she enjoys and finds challenging about her job. She shares her career journey and advice for people like yourself who might be seeking to follow in her footsteps also. It's a wildlife trusting, career switching pod chat. Enjoy.
Well, my name is Patience Thody. I'm Deputy CEO at the Royal Society of Wildlife Trusts.
Great, and welcome, Patience. Thank you so much for joining the podcast. It's nice to connect in this format. We've met one or two other ways in the past, but it's nice to be kind of talking like this today. So let's start from the very beginning then. So you're the Deputy Chief Executive for the Royal Society for Wildlife Trusts. Who or what are the wildlife trusts here in the UK? If people haven't heard of them before, can you just paint a bit of a picture as to, what is the Wildlife Trust? And actually specifically, how does the Royal Society relate to the trust and the movement?
Well, the Wildlife Trust is just an amazing, if you call it the Wildlife Trust, it's an amazing collection of 46 wildlife trusts out there in every county across the UK or group of counties and in the countries as well. So we have a wildlife trust representing Scotland. We have 5 in Wales, and then we have Ulster Wildlife Trust, which is Northern Ireland, and we also have the Crown Dependencies. So we're nature conservation charities all across the UK, everywhere. And the Royal Society of Wildlife Trusts is sort of almost like an umbrella to those 46 wildlife trusts. And I work for the Royal Society of Wildlife Trusts. I've been there 14 years. And what we do is we sort of champion the wildlife trusts, of course. We champion the brand. We are there to look after the wildlife trust as best we can and give them the national voice. But the real USP really of the Wildlife Trust is the fact that we are a sort of bottom-up organisation. So all of those trusts are out there on the ground doing amazing stuff for nature and with people, and in every corner of the UK and the Crown Dependencies. So we're out there doing everything they do. Obviously then can feed up to us so that we can then promote that nationally, although of course all the wildlife trusts are promoting themselves locally as well, but they're deeply rooted within communities because they are out there on the ground. And we try and say, for nature, you're never more than probably 3 miles or so from a wildlife trust nature reserve. So that's pretty good stat. You could well over 60% of the population could walk to a wildlife trust, nature reserve, piece of green space somewhere. And we have our little stat that we quite often use. We have more nature reserves than there are McDonald's restaurants in the UK. In fact, we have 1,000 more. So you can just see the spread of the wildlife trusts.
That's a great stat. I love that. And you're absolutely right. I mean, I live about 1.5 miles from a wildlife trust nature reserve, Glatthorne Cow Pasture, which we sponsor, and they're just fantastic places to visit. And I was looking at some of the stats as well for the wildlife trust movement. So you've got 911,000 members across, I guess, the Federation of Wildlife Trusts, so nearly 1 million members, 35,000 volunteers, a couple of thousand staff. It just gives you a feel of the scale and breadth of the movement. It's incredible.
Absolutely, and we would like to would love to have more members. We're a membership charity
Yeah.
essentially, but we're massive. I mean, we have more members than most political parties have members themselves. So you can imagine the reach that we have across the UK with that. So yeah, always looking for new members, whatever age range. And of course, the staff. We've got, well over 3,500 staff working on behalf of nature and climate across the UK, which is more people on the ground sort of working than most of the other environmental agencies, both in this country and in Europe. So, we're a big charity when you sort of put us all together. But obviously, with our USP being single charities across the UK, doesn't necessarily sound like we're as big as we are, but when you put us all together, we are there fighting the cause every day.
Yeah, and that's what it's all about. And that's what you particularly as the Royal Society do. You join people together and support and promote. Yeah. Can you give us just a bit of an idea of the sorts of work that the Wildlife Trusts on the ground do, the kind of the practical conservation activities? You've mentioned nature reserves, so that's an important part of the movement. Just gives an idea of the sorts of, the activities that the Trust do.
I think many people look at conservation and think, oh, it's just about a load of sort of bearded old men out on nature reserves protecting some I don't know, special species of orchid or something, and maybe it's something that doesn't really involve people. But actually, that's a very, very old-fashioned view of nature conservation nowadays. We really want to bring nature back, make sure that the whole of everybody in this country is touched by nature, especially, during the lockdown, that awful time during the period of COVID, many people realised the benefits of nature. So, getting people outside is really important. So we do massive work with community organising. So we're out there in local communities, encouraging them, whether it might be to grow food, to make space for nature in their local communities, getting people involved on our own nature reserves. Well over 35,000 volunteers for the Wildlife Trust, people out there doing stuff on nature reserve. So we're not only doing the community aspect, we're out there, and yes, of course, a lot of it is around preservation of some of our fantastic and rare species. But it's also about being out there to not only protect that, but also encourage more and greater habitats so that we can attract and make our wildlife more abundant. There's loads of stats, we could play on the reduction of species. We are in Great Britain, we are one of the most nature depleted countries of the world, actually. So we need to bring nature and wildlife back into everybody's lives to try and make things more abundant. So wildlife trusts are out there working in local communities, working on hectare after hectare of land, or acre and acre, whichever generation you come from, working on all that land of nature reserves to try and look after that and preserve the special species and nature that is there. But it is about bringing back, and trying to increase biodiversity, bit of a technical term that people use, but bringing back that abundance of nature. So really important work. And not only are our people in the Wildlife Trust doing practical work on the ground, they're also engaging in communities to help people from different all areas of society, actually, bringing them together to appreciate nature and what it has to offer them. So some fantastic work going on in lots of different trusts.
So there's a question I'd really like to ask around the workforce specifically. So the people that work for the Wildlife Trust and the movement, you mentioned before something like 3,500 people, which is a huge workforce delivering nature conservation within the UK and the overseas territories. What are some of the different roles that are available within the workforce? We think of people on the front line, doing wardens and rangers and the people getting their hands dirty and recording species and managing sites. But what are some of the other roles that people maybe don't think of intuitively as conservation roles that people play? And how important is diversity in that too? It's typically a white middle class movement traditionally, but how is that changing in terms of the workforce now and into the future?
Yeah, you're quite right, Nick. I mean, people will always, I think, look back and think that nature conservation in this country is about white sort of dare I say it, middle class sort of people, as you say, sort of bearded blokes wandering around with butterfly nets. But obviously that isn't the case at all. And we really want to encapsulate and ensure that if we want to reach one of our goals, we've got these massive goals. We want, at least 1 in 4 people to be in touch with nature and understand nature. Because if you don't understand nature and you aren't in touch with it, then you're not going to appreciate it and you're not going to love it and you're not going to care for it. So if we want to do that, then we need to reach far more people from all walks of life, all different backgrounds, in order to come and love nature as we probably do ourselves. You sort of mentioned about what other jobs are there in the Wildlife Trust. Well, of course, it's not just about the people out there on the ground doing stuff, great things on the reserves. It's about the back office people. It's about people like myself. I came from an HR background. It's about your finance officer. It's about your IT person. It's about your leader, your chief exec maybe, or your directors or your senior leadership team. It's about all those people behind the scenes that are operationally supporting charities and various people in those roles. It's about your health and safety officer. It's about a whole plethora of stuff. There's loads of advocacy, marketing. You need fundraisers. You need to bring the money in order to do what we're doing. So you've got fundraising, marketing, you've got digital expertise, you've got things like making sure we're secure with all of our systems that we use. So we might have a cybersecurity expert. We might have an EDI expert, which we do, of course. There's lots and lots of different roles, just like any other organisation that is supporting great work that then happens out there for nature conservation in itself. So I would say you don't have to have been somebody that has got a degree in biology or geography or natural sciences or whatever that you would normally think somebody would have. You could be anybody that is just interested. You could have done, you could have just been somebody at school that quite enjoyed maths and wanted to learn how to do finance or accountancy, because we always need good finance people. You don't have to be wholly qualified in lots of different subjects. You could enter nature conservation sphere, just trying to work really hard through your career, and moving into nature conservation is absolutely fine. We don't ask for degrees in everything and whatever. It's coming into the nature conservation sphere because you're passionate and you're interested, and that's far more important sometimes than having big qualifications and what have you around subjects that might be traditionally seen as nature conservation type subjects.
Yeah. And I think that's such an important message, actually, to hear that there's loads of different roles out there, and you can often, as a career switch, and we'll get onto your switch in a bit, actually, you can sort of bring your background from outside of conservation in. So if you're an IT manager, you could do that for a conservation organization and deploy your passion for wildlife using your existing skills set. You don't necessarily have to retrain. Do you think that conservation is becoming increasingly professionalized as an industry, if you like? Do you think it's improving in terms of its structures and processes, and it's becoming more business-like, actually, in terms of its delivery?
I think it's had to sort of revolutionize as you go along, because again, unless you have, it's awful to say, isn't it, but unless you have money to be able to do stuff, whether that comes from a funder or private donor or the government or wherever that money might come from, legacies quite often, you have to have money to do stuff, and in order to do that you have to professionalize yourself to be able to attract money in order to do that. So yes, I think the conservation sector is certainly professionalising itself along its journey. You've got to think about all the different things that we have to do on the other side of the coin as well. So it might be that we want to try and influence government or local authorities or parish councils. It could be anything, but essentially government, which is what RSWT do a lot of. We want to try and bring government along with us to make them realise what we do need to do for nature and make sure that the right policies are coming out of Westminster or even the devolved nations. And unless we're professional and we know our stuff, how can we, influence, which is another good thing about the Wildlife Trust, because we can use stories and storytelling of what goes on the ground to then be able to show government actually what does work and what does need to happen. So again, we've got people that are interested in politics that work with us, and people that are interested in policy. We work with, DEFRA, we work with government and everything else. So, some really interesting sort of niche areas as well that really help with how we can spread the message and make sure that we're doing the right thing in all parts of society.
It does feel like it's diversifying and new roles are opening up all the time, and we're calling out for new skill sets that previously weren't part of the typical sector, if you like, and increasingly are. I'm really interested in your role specifically, and then sort of switching gears and focusing more on you then, Patience. So you're the Deputy CEO of the Wildlife Trust, the Royal Society for Wildlife Trusts. What the hell's a Deputy CEO? Like, what is it? What's your role? What do you do? How do you describe it to people?
I guess my role is to make things happen, I guess. But we're in a federation, so it's very different. And one of the main things that, because we are so big in many ways, our chief exec, Craig Bennett, is an amazing orator, and you may have seen him. He's the person that is out there, probably sitting on the breakfast sofa, and doing national media, doing campaigning. You open up the newspaper and he might have given a quote or written a piece or whatever. So very external, heightening the profile of the Wildlife Trust and really bringing nature to the fore for everybody in lots of different ways. But behind the scenes, there needs to be someone that is actually running the charity. So I guess my role essentially is to make sure that what happens in the charity, we've got 120 staff ourselves, everybody's okay, everybody's working as effectively and efficiently as we possibly can, that we're doing the right things, because the Charity Commission, they sort of govern us, and obviously we have to do things in certain ways. It's like any business, we have to make sure we're profitable and we're doing the right thing, and we're basically the organisation is working, So a lot of my job is to line manage the senior leadership team. So I sit underneath the chief exec, I line manage the senior management team, and to make sure that I also look after what we call the executive office. So making sure that strategy for the whole of the movement or the federation, we're looking at how we can make sure that we bring that alive. Many organisations have strategies, as you're very aware, but quite often strategies are written once every 3, 5, 10 years, and then they sit on a shelf and nothing really happens. So another part of my job is to make sure that strategy comes alive and we bring it alive, and the whole of the Wildlife Trust movement are sort of really working towards our big 2030 strategy. Right. So a lot of work going into that. Making sure that everybody is okay and we're functioning really well. So it's a bit of a sort of, I suppose it's a little bit like a director of operations type role, but it's something a little bit more than that, because it is not just the operational area, it's the whole of the charity. Not all charities have a deputy CEO. It's something we've had to do because we are a federation, so it's slightly different makeup, but it really works. And I think we've both got the right personality to make sure that does work, and I love it. It's very different and very enjoyable.
Yeah. And I'm really interested in what you said there about like delivering the strategy. So you say, every organization at some level has a strategy. Often they can sit on shelves and gather dust, sadly, but that could be the truth. Like, how do you turn a strategy, a document that has targets and a mission and a vision and things like that, and a timescale associated with it, 2030? How do you turn that into action? How do you, particularly Patience, like what process do you go through to say, right, we've got this strategy, I'm going to almost hold people to account or support them or whatever? Like, what steps do you go through to ensure it's implemented?
But of course, being a federation and there's 46 separate charities out there, we can't tell anybody what to do. But what we did do is we spent that great time during, sounds awful, isn't it? But during lockdown, we spent quite a bit of time online, all of us. So chief execs and chairs and trustees from across the movement. So that's a grouping of, 120 or more people, came together and we worked through what did we want our strategy to be. And all together, we came up with this amazing strategy, and everybody bought into that. So we all signed it off and said, yeah, we're going to do that. And then because they're all separate charities, all those trusts went off. And so what we've done is try and support them and enable them to put together their own strategies along similar lines. So they're similar to the strategy. Obviously, they're going to be slightly different because depending on which part of the country you are, not everything is going to be totally relevant to your own wildlife trust. So we then have supported them. And what we've done is we've then done some what we call backcasting. So we've actually brought all the senior leaders from the movement together again. And we've said, so what do we want to look like in 2030? What will the Wildlife Trust actually want to see happen if we're going to bring this strategy alive? What will we look like? What will we need to do? And then Craig Bennett, our chief exec, took us through this backcasting exercise, and we plotted back right to today to say, well, if we want to do X, then we'll have to have done Y first. And we went back and did it all. So now we've got a plan of what we can do every sort of year or a couple of years and the milestones that we need to reach. So it's good strategy stuff, which we can then hold ourselves to account. And we now bring together all of our senior chief execs and chairs, or their designate, that's okay as well, come together and we meet once a month and we talk about it and we bring to life what's happening in the trusts and what we can do to support people in what they're doing. We also have 13 strategy groups. So our strategy was 3 goals and 5 enabling priorities and 5, I'm just trying to think, strategic enablers. And we wanted to make sure that we had people from all across the Federation on different groups to then be able to discuss how can we bring that alive. And those groups get together every 2 or 3 months as well. So basically, we've got the involvement of the whole of the Wildlife Trust thinking about it, talking about it, and then actioning it and actually doing stuff on the ground. So we are totally bringing that to life, and we will keep going with that. And it's a bit of a slog because you might think people will get a bit bored, but actually, if we keep it alive and keep it fresh and we put in new stuff that's going on and we share our successes together, hopefully we will move much quicker towards that 2030 goal. I mean, if we could achieve our 2030 goal, how amazing would that be? But we are realistic that we might not quite get there, but let's hope we could. And so we just keep ploughing in the momentum. And so my part in that is making sure that we are facilitating trust, which is another big thing, as you mentioned earlier. The Royal Society of Wildlife Trusts is to facilitate the trust coming together because, together we're much more impactful and, we can do far more if we all work together much more effectively and efficiently. So part of my role is to be constantly thinking about how we can do that and make sure that we're doing all that stuff together in the most efficient and effective way possible.
Yeah. I absolutely love that as well. I mean, just in terms of just an example of how the trust movement works and how the machine operates, if you like, all the different moving parts coming together in a unified direction and how you're sort of managing that process, and supporting it from the Royal Society, from the top down. I know you're bottom up, but, even from like Craig saying, let's backcast and all sort of stuff, I find that really fascinating. Yeah. And actually just as a little aside, like we do career workshops sometimes. And one of the things we say, is we help people to project themselves into say 3 years time or 5 years time into a successful career, whatever they think it looks like. And one of the wrap up exercises, okay, so if you want to be there by then, where do you need to be by a year from now? Okay, let's think what that might be. And 6 months and then 1 month. And then we get it down to what do you need to do by the end of today? What small thing can you do now? So I quite like that exercise of making the big quite tangible and a stepwise, let's do it now. Yeah. I'm a little conscious of time. So let's move on a little bit, but I still want to focus on your role still. So we understand what you do. Like what do you enjoy about your job? And you can understand what the next question might be as well. But let's start there. What are some of the highlights or the things that you enjoy the most, the bits you look forward to within your work?
Well, I'm afraid I have to say people. And what I didn't say really originally was my background was I have an HR background. So I used to work for a bank for nearly 18 years, which was very different to what I'm doing now. But I do love people. So actually, the great thing about the charity sector for me is that actually people in the charity sector generally are just most amazing, passionate people that, to be honest, not necessarily at RSWT, the Royal Society, but quite often across the charity sector, they can be seen as the poor relation when it comes to salary and benefits and things like that, because the charity sector doesn't tend to always have as much money as maybe, let's say, the financial sector as a comparator, or the banking sector, or being a lawyer or a doctor or something. That it doesn't tend to attract the same amount of pay scales, which is a whole new thesis in itself, but and something that I'm very strongly trying to advocate, that the charity sector should recognise the value of people. So what do I love about the Royal Society of Wildlife Trust and the Wildlife Trust? Well, it has to be passionate people. I enjoy the role. It sometimes feels like you're a bit like a conductor in an orchestra, and you're sort of there trying to just make sure that everybody works together and we sort of have the most, some beautiful harmonies, in that orchestra. But of course, not everybody is in unison. They're not always the same, because people aren't the same. We are all different. We all have different strengths, different areas of influence in lots of different ways. So I would say I love it because it is a sort of like a coordinating role. It is working with the most amazing people. It's being able to develop and see people, develop their careers, watching somebody that might come as a younger intern and maybe work through the organisation and end up being one day a chief exec even, within the sector. So it's great to see that and actually see people thrive. And I have to say, in the charity sector, you have to be a little bit more of a jack of all trades almost. You do have to have a few more skills up your sleeve, I always think, than if you were just in a big corporate where you're just doing one job day in, day out. So I absolutely love it. I wouldn't want to go back into a corporate sector now. I believe that people in the charity sector, play hard and work hard, and I hope that that's something that really makes you feel passionate about what you're doing, and also to know that I'm getting up in the morning and doing something most amazing, whether it's for climate or for nature, is much more thrilling than thinking, what's the share price this morning? So just knowing that you are contributing, hopefully in some small way. Don't have to be out there on the ground on a nature reserve, doing something there. But what I'm doing in the back office, so to speak, is really contributing to help fight this nature crisis, which actually is what we're in at the moment. And it's so important to really think about, where we're going. We've only really got 7 years, I guess, now to turn this crisis around and what's going on. And that's quite scary for me, because if we tip over around climate and everything else, we are going to have real problems. And we're already seeing that, aren't we? Out there in nature, more wildfires, more flooding. Only a couple of weeks ago, I was sat in darkness for a day. The local village was flooding, never been flooded before. We're seeing all this happening around us, and if we don't act and take it seriously, then I think the country is going to be in a bit of a mess, especially when we could solve a lot of these problems with natural solutions. So conservation, really important to me in that respect.
Yeah. And just on that, I mean, normally as a part of our wrap up, I usually ask people like yourselves, like, what do conservationists need to be better at in order to have more impact? Like as a movement or as a sector, however you want to kind of frame it, we are in crisis, we are facing huge challenges. We are seeing wildlife, nature, biodiversity, whatever we want to call it, kind of slipping away. We're losing the battle. We're optimistic, we have to be, but we're losing the battle. What, if you could wave a magic wand, like what would you like to change about the movement, or what do you think we need to be better at to have more impact and to really move that needle?
Do you mean generally? Just
yeah.
Well, I think there's some real simple things that we could just do, and that's to really influence government to say there are a few things that you could do very quickly and very easily that would really, really help. It might be, for instance, solar panels on every new build, every roof that could take them. It could be more energy efficiency. Just putting more money into energy efficiency in homes and offices and buildings and whatever. Really going for that, restoring our peat. So there's lots of things. There's so many things we could just quite simply do that would actually really help resolve some of our climate issues. That's firstly. And there's lots of things we could do to help with biodiversity, and that is looking after our land, making sure we're not using nasty pesticides and putting chemicals and things, maybe eating better food and not so much I don't know, just eating better types of food for all of us, would help with production and better stuff. So government could very quickly, I believe, and simply
Yeah.
resolve a lot of the issues that we have in this country around climate. And we could alleviate much of the, whether it's flooding, or wildfires, or all sorts of things. We could capture more carbon, etc., etc. So I think we need to get better at telling our story to government, and saying this is what we can do. And I have to say the Wildlife Trusts are brilliant at this, because they're going out, because there's 46 chief execs, 46 chairs, 600 trustees. They're out there talking to ministers or MPs or local councils all the time, but trying to bring that alive. If we could get better at that, that would help the policymakers. And then it's just about spreading the word and making sure people in communities, as I said right at the beginning, people actually appreciate nature. Because if you appreciate nature and what's on your doorstep, or hopefully you can create some on your doorstep, then if that helps, then you can then receive, those people will then value it.
Great. Well, I'm going to circle back on another question I started there and didn't finish, but I want to follow that thread. You shared what you love about the role, which is working with people, and the breadth of people you work with, and how you help and orchestrate and support them. What are some of the challenges or some of the bits of the role which you don't enjoy so much that you would like to share publicly?
Well, that's an interesting one, isn't it? So I guess I'm only human like anybody else. So you could say sometimes long hours, in order to get things done. That's not quite so enjoyable, is it? Because you always have to have a bit of a balance, work-life balance.
Yeah.
I think sometimes the frustrations that, especially at the moment with, dare I say, with government at the moment, things I don't enjoy at the moment is that I know we could solve some of the issues and problems we have in this country around nature and climate, but actually you feel like you're influencing and you're getting somewhere, and then it's sort of 3 steps forward and then 2 steps back, and that's hard, and actually it can be really sad, because you put your life and soul into trying to influence the right people, and then the people might change, or governments may not be listening or in listening mode because they've got other things on their minds, and that's hard actually. And for people that are dedicating their life to try and do the right thing by nature and climate, to get knockbacks can be really hard, because we know the importance of it, and it just is so frustrating that we feel that not everybody seems to get the message, even with David Attenborough out there on a Sunday evening doing the many things that he has done, so it is reaching quite a lot of people. We're out there in local communities talking about it. People are learning, children are learning about it much more in school, but still we don't seem to be getting there, and policymakers don't seem to be listening, and that's really, really sad, I think. And it can be disheartening actually. You sometimes think, well, why do I bother? But of course we bother. You've got to keep going, because that's the way that change happens, and sometimes change can take quite a long time to happen, but you have to be resilient and keep going.
Yeah. How do you stay positive, and how do you stay optimistic when we're facing such challenges as we are?
I suppose I'm just very lucky that I am a glass half full person anyway, so I'm quite a positive person. So I do keep going, and I think that's in your natural makeup, because you do have the wins every now and again. You do see the really great things that are happening on the ground. When I see a film clip of a group of people in a really deprived area, and they're all smiling because they've all come together and they've built something amazing for nature, and some nature is coming back into that, or they're growing some food, or they're doing something, and you think, wow, that's just amazing. That's transformed that community, not just those 2 or 3 people that are there, but actually a whole gang of people, are doing something for nature. That really sort of grounds you and keeps you positive. I'm very, very lucky. I live in a rural location, but the majority of people in this country live in urban, towns and cities, and don't always have that green space near them. So we have to create that and create those opportunities. So difficult, but we've just got to keep going, all of us, I think, because if we don't and we all give up, then there's not much hope really, is there?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And as we start to sort of wrap things up, I'm interested in your career history and your background. You've referenced a couple of times there you worked, for the banking sector, the kind of private commercial sector previously. When you look back at your career and your journey today, like what have been like the key milestones that have kind of got you to where you are? And attaching to that question, what advice would you give to someone else who might be thinking of following maybe a similar path of switching careers and embedding yourself within a kind of conservation career?
Well, I have a bit of a strange career path, really, because at school I never knew what I wanted to do. I had no idea. In fact, my careers advisor at the time made us all, it was in the 1970s or 80s, early 80s, and we had to fill out a questionnaire. And actually, when my questionnaire, my results came up, it said that my career was going to be a lion tamer. So I sat at school and thought, well, really, I don't know any circuses around here, and I don't want to be a lion tamer, thanks very much. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. In fact, at the time, there was a scheme called the YTS scheme, and I decided one day that I wanted to be a car mechanic. But it was back in the days when you were sort of standing in a classroom and they said, okay, you want to be a car mechanic? Well, you're a girl, so you can go and work in the shop that's attached to the garage, and all you boys there, you can all go and get dirty under a car and learn how to do oil changes and things. So that was a bit weird. So I worked in a shop, which was great. Actually, I loved it. It was with people, and I loved it. And I did that for a few months. I thought, oh, this is all right. And I was actually earning a bit of money, so that was quite interesting. So it's almost like an apprenticeship. I sort of started it, and then I thought, oh, maybe I'd like to go to college and learn a few skills. So I went and did hotel management and catering for 2 years, and then I naturally went on and did an HND. And I never went into the hotel industry. But what I did learn at that quite a young age was being with people, having a bit of structure. But also I learned about some of those theories, which I look back on now and think, oh, it was actually quite good. But at the time I thought it was all a bit rubbish because it was this academia stuff. But it was all about line management and how to manage people and all that sort of thing. I then went into the bank and ended up doing HR and really enjoyed that, actually. But I got to a stage where in my HR life I was spending a lot of time making people redundant, which is the part of HR which I don't really enjoy. I love seeing people develop. I said that before. I love seeing people transform. I love supporting them in that, but I didn't enjoy making people redundant, even if it was the right thing because it was a square peg round hole, or just because the organisation. Actually, I was working in a bank that was offshoring a lot of its work. Yeah. So centres were closing. And when the opportunity came for me to take the package myself, redundancy myself, I actually went through that, which is something I'd done to quite a few thousand people. And then I looked around and thought, what do I want to do? And I looked at lots of different jobs. And I actually thought, I think I'm going to go have a look at this charity sector thing. So I went and had a look at this wildlife trust. And I thought, they're quite interesting. I love nature. I love conservation. I don't really know what this charity sector thing's about, but I'll go and do it for a couple of months maybe, and then I'll get myself a proper job, is probably what I thought at the time. And I got there and I thought, wow, this isn't at all what I thought. It was totally different perception to what I was thinking the charity sector was. And that was, 14 years ago, actually. And I've never looked back. It's been the most fulfilling role, definitely, and stage in my career. And it's opened lots of different opportunities to me in so many, many, many different ways, that I never even imagined that would come knocking. So something very different that I never really thought would happen. Really interesting. And it opened those doors, and it has.
I'm really intrigued. Like, how was it different to how you perceived it would be?
So I just thought that working for a charity was, you'd maybe go into some office somewhere and maybe you didn't do very much because they're not. What are they doing really? What are charities doing? They do some work, don't they? They do some good stuff, don't they? But I don't really know what they do. I don't understand about how they're governed or how they work or how they're funded even. Is it people that give donations? Is it the people on the street that fill, tin rattlers? Is that how you get paid? Because I didn't have a clue, really. I mean, I knew they did important stuff. And then I realised over the years that crumbs, they're doing the most important stuff that government should be doing, actually. And without charities in the charity sector, society would be in a really, really poor place, Yeah. So, the perception at the time was, not too sure what that's all about. I'll go and have a look at it. It might be very different to what I'm doing, but I've never worked so hard as I do now, most certainly. And it was hard, working in banking. But it's very much, play hard, work hard, and you can see the benefits from it. So, very different.
Yeah, interesting. What advice would you give for someone who's perhaps even in the commercial sector now? They might be working as a banker or a lawyer or a teacher or a nurse or whatever it might be, but they're passionate about conservation and they'd love to kind of find a career in it. Have you got any advice for those sorts of people?
Well, I would say don't be scared to apply for a role, because obviously, just like you would do in a commercial setting, people skills are really, really important. Whatever the skill you have, they're probably going to be very important. Now, don't get me wrong, if you're applying for a finance role in a charity and you're coming from a different background, it isn't going to work. But most skills are transferable, and they're certainly, whatever you are doing in your current role, there'll probably be a space for that. Generally, most jobs within the charity somewhere or other. So I would say, don't be scared to apply. The charity sector is always looking for great people from all different backgrounds. So just apply. But I'd also say there are other things to do as well, just like you would do if you were going for a job in another organisation. Get to know the organisation. Wildlife Trusts, we're lucky, most conservation organisations, you can volunteer. So you could get to know the organisation by volunteering as a sort of, what do they do at that organisation, If you volunteer, you would get to know that, and that would give you a little bit of a heads up and a head start as well. So I would say, think about that. Think about volunteering. And I would just say, just find out about the sector. Go in, talk to people. People are always willing to talk about what they do. That will really help you as well. But the main thing is, don't be scared and look for those routes in and those opportunities. Come and speak to somebody. There's always somebody that will talk to you about what you could or couldn't do.
Yeah, absolutely. Great advice and really kind of practical, actionable steps to take. Yeah, I love that. Thank you. Well, as we sort of wrap up, we're coming towards the end of our time. We've got a couple of people in the audience who I'm sure would like to ask a question or two of you as well after we finish recording. Last couple of questions for you then, if I may, Patience. One is a really simple, easy one. If we could transport you to any location so you can see any species, where would you like to go and what would you like to see?
Ooh, anywhere in the world or in this country?
Yeah, anywhere in the world.
Oh, crumbs. I don't know. I'll have to think about it, because there's so many wonderful species that I would love to go to the Galapagos. I would love to go, to places like Tasmania. There's all sorts of places I'd like to go and just see some of the really rare stuff, and probably a lot of marine stuff as well. So really difficult. But if truth be known, the place I really love being is in Wales, actually, hence my background. I just love being in Wales. So actually, although I've seen it many times, just to be back at this river, for instance, and watching salmon leap, at the right time of year, or just to be sitting watching beavers or otters, the wildlife in this country is truly, truly amazing. And I think everybody gets very het up and excited about, because they watch a David Attenborough type series and they see all this amazing wildlife around the world. But actually, you don't need to travel. You don't need to have the money. You don't need to go around the world. You can just see it on your doorstep if you, do some really, really simple things. If you go to a nature reserve, there will always be nature there. Even if you just put out some water and some food for the birds, you will attract them in, So you can see nature all around you. And I think we forget, because we probably haven't. I don't think we've majored on the beautiful and amazing nature that we have in the United Kingdom. We tend to always think that amazing nature is in the Galapagos, or, I don't know, in the Maldives, or wherever people go to dive or see things. You can see it all in this country. Not the same species, of course, but you can see it. And we are rich in wildlife, but not as rich as we should be. And that's the problem. We need to bring back wildlife far more.
Yeah, and that's what the Wildlife Trust is all about. It's been really nice talking to you, Patience. Thank you again for joining us today, sharing your precious time with us. If people want to find out more about you, and particularly the Wildlife Trust movement, perhaps get involved or support in some way, where should we go? Where should we send them?
You can always just look on the Wildlife Trust website. Really easy. It's www.wildlifetrust.org. We've got some amazing stuff on the website. Google the Wildlife Trust. There's a Wildlife Trust near you, so you can always find out more. You could always look me up on the website. But the many people, as I have said a few times this afternoon, please do just pick up the phone to your local Wildlife Trust, because they will talk to you about stuff. We love sharing anything to do with nature to people.
Yeah, absolutely, and I totally second that. Once again, thank you so much, Patience. It's been a pleasure. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that, everyone. If you did, then please do hit the subscribe button to get notified of new episodes as they drop. And also, please give us a rating or a review, because it really helps us to get in front of more people, and we really enjoy reading them all. As you'll have heard, our podcasts are now recorded in front of a live audience who sit in and listen to the chat, and then after the mics are turned off, they get a chance to talk to the host, to share their thoughts, and also to ask questions. It's a really great format. If you'd like to be in the audience, all you need to do is join the Conservation Careers Academy. Now, in the Conservation Careers Academy, you'll get full access to the world's biggest conservation job board, listing over 15,000 jobs, volunteer and internships across the globe each year. You'll also enjoy access to our amazing CC Pro private members community with regular events, networking and support. Plus, you'll get full access to our growing library of career boosting resources, guides and templates. And best of all, it only costs a few dollars, euros or pounds per month to join the Academy. Now, to find out more, please visit conservation-careers.com/academy, or simply click the join button at the top of our website. See you on the inside.